Kia ora, this is Liz. Welcome to Dame Supplies. If you are new to the channel, can I suggest you go watch the intro video so you know what's happening on the channel and you don't get a shock when you realise it's a Bible study. For those who have already been on the channel for ages, I'm sure you have already subscribed. Please give me a like at the end of the video. So today we're looking at John chapter 10, verses 16 to 18, and I will read them to you now. And other sheep I have which are not of this fold, them also I must bring, and they will hear my voice, and there will be one flock and one shepherd. Therefore my Father loves me, because I lay down my life that I may take it again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it again. This command I have received from my Father. So, other sheep that aren't of his sheepfold. What could that possibly mean? The Greek word means another within the same kind. It distinguishes between two or more items, peoples, or concepts. They are similar in nature, but not exactly the same. Jesus is obviously referring to Gentiles, which would have ticked the Pharisees off no end. The Israelites were used to having a singular, exclusive relationship with God, which is odd really, because right back in the beginning of that relationship, God said he would make them a kingdom of priests. They were meant to be a light that drew the Gentiles to God right from their inception. This they failed to do, and over the centuries, prophets and psalmists lamented this failing to be that light. And so we come to John the Baptist, who wasn't that light, but drew attention to that light, which was Jesus. And Jesus, though he originally came to the house of Israel, or the lost sheep of Israel as he called them, came to bring a message that would extend eventually outward into all the world. Just as the nation of Israel had the odd sheep from another sheepfold, think Ruth or Rahab here, the new kingdom was meant to extend beyond the borders of the promised land. The Great Commission sees Jesus extend the borders of his reach. His final instructions to the disciples were, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations," which fulfills, finally, the third part of the promise given to Abraham, which was, "Through your offspring all nations of the earth will be blessed." And in the end, when the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders are all bowed before the Lamb of God, they sing this song, which I am not going to sing. "Worthy are you to take the scroll and open its seals, because you were slain, and by your blood you purchased for God those from every tribe and tongue and people and nation." We are not of his original flock. We are not descendants of Abraham, or at least I don't think we are. Well, I'm not, at least. But we have been adopted into that flock, and we are all now members of his sheepfold. And it was an imperative for Jesus that it be so. The must in this verse, which in the Old English is behooves, and I have to tell you that because I love that word, means it is an absolute necessity, inevitable even. In fact, according to the words spoken to Isaiah, it just wasn't enough for him to only raise up the tribes of Jacob and restore the protected ones of Israel. That wasn't enough. God was also going to make him a light for the nations, to bring God's salvation to the ends of the earth. It should never have shocked the leaders in Israel that the message was not just for Israel. There are hints, mentions, and outright promises throughout their scriptures that God was eventually going to be for all peoples. Paul puts it best in his letter to the Ephesians when he says, "Remember that you were at that time separate from Christ, excluded from the commonwealth of Israel and strangers to the covenant of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. But now in Christ Jesus, you who were formerly far off have been brought near by the blood of Christ. For he himself is our peace, who made both groups into one and broke down the barrier of the dividing wall." There's no longer a dividing wall between the nation of Israel and the rest of us, or there's not meant to be at least. The rest of us get the opportunity to hear the voice of the Good Shepherd and decide to follow him, or not, depending on our own desires. There will, in the end, however, be one flock and one shepherd. It was always meant to be that way. We were always meant to be one kingdom under one God King. There's meant to be unity between us, a unity that doesn't mean we all conform to one dress code or even one language, but a unity within our loyalty to Christ. which did not stop some fallacies arising here. The Christian Bible translator Jerome, when translating the original Greek into Latin, wrote one fold rather than one flock. And you would think that that wouldn't be a problem. It shouldn't have been a problem, but it became the foundation upon which the Roman Catholic Church built its notion of exclusivity. To the early readers of Jerome's translation, it seemed that Jesus was saying there would only be one organisation. The obvious take from that, from their perspective, was that there could be no salvation outside of their own organisation. And that, in a nutshell, is why the Roman Catholic Church consider themselves to be the only road to salvation. One little mistake. Didn't take much, did it? Mormons, on the other hand, see this verse relating to Jesus' alleged visit to the Western Hemisphere and to the visit to Joseph Smith. They consider the other sheep to be Israelites living in the New World. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that there are two flocks. I don't know how they get that one. The little flock, described in Revelation as the 144,000. So according to the J-Dubs, these are the ones who will rule with Christ in heaven. That number, according to them, was apparently reached in 1935. So 99% of modern Jehovah's consider themselves to be part of the other flock, who will live on the new earth. All of these misinterpretations forget that God doesn't have these kind of divisions. Humanity is split into only two categories. You're either for God or you're against him. That's it, really. As Poole said, the ancient dividing line between Jew and Gentile was gone. Therefore, there is only one possible division left, and at the end of days, even that division will be gone. Those who are against God will be gone, and we will be one flock of God. Which brings us to the closing thought of Jesus' word picture on sheep. Therefore my Father loves me, because I lay down my life that I may take it again. Now, therefore is a word that can mean because, which would make the sentence rather confusing, because it would read, because my Father loves me, because I lay down my life that I may take it again. As I said, rather confusing. They are translated differently because they're not just different words, but they're actually different types of words, right? The Greek word translated therefore means through. It's a preposition denoting the channel through which an act is completed. And the word translated because is a conjunction joining the two parts of the sentence. It is through everything that Jesus has said that the Father loves him, and then he reiterates it why a second time with because I lay down my life, which makes it seem like God's love is conditional, and we know that's not true. So how do we understand this passage? Well, John MacArthur solved the riddle by saying that there are two attitudes that define the relationship of Jesus to the Father: love and obedience. These two, says Mr. MacArthur, are eternally linked, since it is impossible to love God without obeying him. And John would tend to agree with MacArthur. Here's what he said in his first letter. He who says I know him and does not keep his commandments is a liar, and the truth is not in him. But whoever keeps his word, truly the love of God is perfect in him. By this we know that we are in him. The Father loved the Son before he laid down his life. He loved him after he laid down his life. The love didn't change, it always was. But the proving of the Son's love to the Father was in the sacrifice, just as the proving of our love of God is in our deeds. Love is not a feeling, it's an action. It's something we demonstrate, not just give lip service to. You know this, right? I mean, you've probably heard of the 5 love languages: gifts, time, acts of service, words of affirmation, physical touch. Apart from words of affirmation, these are all actions. Even the words are not just hearing, I love you. It's hearing words that build you up as a person, and those take energy, thought, and time. It shouldn't worry us that Jesus' love for the Father is demonstrated in an act of service. That's just one aspect of love. It doesn't mean the Father wouldn't have loved him if he hadn't gone through with it. The specific Greek word for love in this passage is agape, which is the way to describe sacrificial love. The Son sacrifices for the Father, and we shouldn't miss what that means for us, right? Sacrifice is meant to be part and parcel of your Christian walk. If life is going so swimmingly that you never have to sacrifice so much as your time, something's not working quite right. Jesus lays down his life, right? Much is made these days by skeptics and atheists about God being an abusive father, forcing his son onto the cross. They call it cosmic child abuse, which just tells you they haven't read the text. Right? This is not an enforced slaughter. Jesus lays down his life voluntarily. It's an act of service, not brutality. When he's in the Garden of Gethsemane, giving his human heart its due and saying, "Take this cup," he's also willing to add the writer, "Nevertheless, you're not my will but yours." And when he cries out, "Into your hands I commend my spirit," as he's hanging on his cross and taking his final breath, he's giving his life away, not being forced to do so. Both Matthew and John use words to indicate the voluntary nature of the cross. At that point of death, Matthew writes that Jesus yielded his spirit. To yield something is to give voluntarily. John says that he gave his spirit. These are giving words. The unforced nature of the act is obvious if you just read the text. Often, however, skeptics and atheists don't really do that. Most of them don't, at least. Some of them do, but most of them are just echoing the words of their own heroes and so are unaware of what's actually said within the Bible's covers. For those leading the flock of atheists, who may even be aware, they have either unknowingly or knowingly, which is much more disturbing, twisted the words or deliberately misinterpreted them to find horror in the place of the beauty of the sacrifice. It shouldn't be such an abhorrent thing. Doesn't the fireman lay down his life when he runs into a burning building? Doesn't the soldier lay down his life when he goes to war? Even mothers lay down their lives to care for their children. Well, the good ones do, at least. Sacrifice, voluntary sacrifice, should not be seen as abhorrent. It's the most loving gesture anyone can do for another. Modern thinking has twisted it, mainly because the twisters been at their heads and made them see the good as something appalling. We should pray for these people. They really have no idea what's right and what's wrong anymore. There is a second clause in verse 17 that shouldn't be missed. So he said, "I lay down my life," so that was your first clause, "that I may take it again." Now there's your second. "That I may take it again," that was the end goal. The cross was merely the mechanism by which that end goal was achieved. It was the crossroads before the right road is taken. Jesus went to the cross knowing that he would take his life back from death, recover it from the grave, defeat that final enemy, and then go on to be the good shepherd at the head of the one and only flock. He had to rise again in order to fulfill that role. A shepherd still in his grave would not be of much use to the flock of sheep, now would he? There is much speculation about how Jesus rose from the grave. Many modern teachers teach that Jesus was suffering in hell, but the Father intervened. Jesus' words here, well, they negate that idea. He said he lays it down, he takes it back. These are both actions taken by the Son. And he reiterates it in the next verse when he says he has the power to take it back. In other words, he has the authority to redeem himself, which doesn't negate the Father from having a part to play. Romans 6:4 states that just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, so will we. So the glory of the Father makes it look like God does have a part to play. But that makes sense because, let's face it, they do everything in concert, right? The sacrifice is not complete until he takes his life back. The fulfillment of it all is in the resurrection. That is when Jesus takes up his throne and crown again, when he becomes the true and final form of the Good Shepherd. And just in case you missed it, Jesus doubles down on his words in the 18th verse. He said, "No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of myself." So there is no enforced child abuse here, right? It was an entirely voluntary act, one that the Father not just approved of, but loved. I have the power, says Jesus. So that would be authority and jurisdiction, not just ability. It's not just that Jesus was capable of laying it down physically, like laying it down, but that he had the right to do so. So it's all going swimmingly, and then you hit that last clause, this command I have received from my Father, which does make it seem like Jesus is actually being told what to do. But given all that he said prior to this last thought, you've got to think there's something else going on here. We have to ask, well, does the command relate to the first part of the sentence, the bit about laying his life down, or the second part about taking it back, or does it relate to them both? And also, is it an actual dictatorial command? So the scholars say it relates to both. And when you think about it, in one sense, right, Jesus is not free to do whatever he wants. The Godhead must be in agreement, and therefore the Father must have had some say in whether or not this action was warranted. So imagine a son who has all the authority in a father's workshop, right? Planning a big change in how that workshop is going to be run because it doesn't quite suit the son anymore. Would he not first seek the father's opinion on whether or not that change would actually work? This was the plan from the beginning, right? They agreed upon it. All members of the Godhead, so Father, Son, Holy Spirit, all agreed on this was part of the plan. But Jesus' voluntary act is not made less voluntary by the decision being made by all three. He was still the one who went, choose me, send me. Now, many of the translations have charge here rather than command, which makes it more of a mission than an absolute order. It was the mission to go to the lost sheep of Israel, call them into the true sheepfold, deal with the robbers and the thieves, or at least show them up to be robbers and thieves, and then lay down his life as the door into the sheepfold for the rest of humanity who would come after his death and resurrection. That was the plan. It was a stunningly beautiful plan, and it worked. But it was one that required the gore and pain of the cross. Sin had to be paid for once and for all. Satan had to be defeated at his own game, and so Jesus snatches victory from what looks like the jaws of defeat. Satan was laughing for all of 2 minutes before he realized he just slit his own throat. That having taken the punishment due all of us, Jesus effectively freed us all from the clutches of the devil's hand. All we have to do is drop the one hand, grab the other. Now that is the end of Jesus' teaching regarding sheep and sheepfolds on this particular occasion. The previously blind man, having been rejected by the leaders of Jerusalem, finds his home in the sheepfold of the Lord. And the leaders? Well, we'll see how they get on next week, shall we? This week, consider his sacrifice, the voluntary nature of it, the decision made in heaven to go forward with this really audacious plan, the obviousness of it that Satan missed completely, the price paid, the way made clear, the open door into the sheepfold should you want to walk through it. What do we do with this sacrifice? How do we model it as Christians? Are we willing to even talk about it to those who might reject us because of it? Are we willing to even sacrifice relationship to gain a soul for the kingdom? What do we do with this sacrifice? That's where I'm going to leave you. I know it feels like I'm leaving you hanging, but that's because you need to think about it for yourself. I can't supply you a reason for that one. It's up to you what you do with the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. I am done for this week. I pray blessings on you and your household, and I will see you again next week. Ka kite anō.